Beep, 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 beep. Morning, afternoon, evening. How the hell are you all? Oh dear. Oh my. It's my birthday tomorrow. Yay! So I should be on the beg. Nice coffee. Don't be a warrior teacher. The usual stuff. But before we do that, I've got an interesting piece here. Have a look at this. This is something that's worth a pipette, as they say, which is that the NHS will be pursued if gender policies don't change, Equality's watchdog says. This is from the BBC on the 17th of April by Ruth Comerford. It's interesting, isn't it, how this is starting to bite already. We know that, for example, some of the Parliament folk have said, oh no, it's a terrible thing. How do we stop it? We also know that it's really just a clarification of law. It's not any new law. It's just that this is what the law means. And now that the law means that, many organisations, those of us are aware of who are the worst offenders, are going to find it hard to have to do what they have to do, which is to comply with the law. Crafty devils thought they were sneaking something in under the radar for the last God knows how many years. They got caught and they got beaten roundly by the For Women Scotland result, which occurred and is now the clarification that we required. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what will happen, because it's the EHRC, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, who are saying, no, you get it right or we're coming for you, which I think is marvellous. It's the start of something good, and it'll be very interesting to see it unfold over the next few weeks and months. So let's have a look and see what they've said. Well, the BBC report that along with other public bodies, the NHS will be receiving guidelines after the Supreme Court unanimously ruled a woman is defined by biological sex under equalities law. We've been speaking to the health service for an inordinately long time. We will now be asking them, when will they be updating their advice? Baroness Faulkner told the BBC Radio 4's Today programme. Now that's interesting, isn't it? We've been speaking to the health service for an inordinately long time. Right. They've got the receipts. The Baroness Faulkner and her team, know who at the NHS is causing a problem, who's not. Go on, make the list public. Come on, Baroness, give us the names. We want to know who these people are so they can be brought to task for spreading this vicious cult. Currently, the NHS guidance says trans people, men and women who are unwell, should be accommodated according to the way they dress, their names and their pronouns, for God's sake. Under this ruling, this would be scrapped. So in other words, none of this, well, they look like a woman, therefore they are a woman. None of the stereotype stuff, that can all go in the bin. The EHRC, always get those two wrong, says it is working at pace to provide an updated code of conduct for services, including the NHS and prisons, and it expects its updated guidance to be in place by the summer. So by the summer, i.e., in a month or two, every single man in the female estate should be out and in the male estate in terms of prisons, and hospitals should be talking about people who are men and women rather than breast havers, cervix wielders, or whatever it is they've been calling cervix wielders, or whatever it is they've been calling them. Ovary possessors. What else have they come with over the years? Load of bloody nonsense. Get on with it. Men or women, that's it. Non-binary. No. So the ruling will have implications for spaces such as hospital wards, changing rooms, domestic refuges, and it goes on. I mean, schools are going to come into this. All organisations are going to have to comply. Asked whether the HRC would pursue the NHS if it doesn't change, Baroness Faulkner replied, yes, we will. They are unequivocal. Laid out in 3 lovely words. Yes, we will. Thank you, Baroness Faulkner, who's going to take the NHS to task. Starmer's screwed, isn't he? Whichever way he cuts it. Because, the biggest pushers of this nonsense right now are the unions. We saw that with the disgusting behaviour of Joe Grady from UCU. And we know that Unison are up to their, publicly funded, because they are, because the people that we pay the NHS pay them, and they're going against the wishes of most of the public. They're a publicly funded body to all intents and purposes who are misbehaving. We will be having these conversations with them to update that guidance, she said. An NHS spokesperson told the BBC the service was reviewing guidance on same-sex accommodation, and as part of this process, will consider and take into account all relevant legislation and the Supreme Court ruling. Well, the NHS spokesperson might well be saying that, and the NHS may well be doing it, but I can guarantee you that if they can stick their heels in and make that process last 5 years, they will. The NHS is absolutely riddled with lunatics who believe in the trans and gender nonsense. So I'm going to be interested to see exactly what they're going to do in order to get this absolute lunacy out of the public eye once and for all. Wednesday's case was brought by women's rights campaigners who challenged the Scottish Government, arguing sex-based protection should apply only to people that are born female. Judges ruled that when the term women is used in the Equality Act, it means a biological woman, and sex means biological sex. Oh, yes! This means a gender recognition certificate or a sex lying document, a legal document that recognises an individual's gender identity. That's not what it is, right? It doesn't recognise gender identity at all. It just says that you're going through a process because you're a bit, you're unwell. That will now not change a person's legal sex for the purpose of the Equality Act. This is, of course, unless the Labour Party gets its knickers in a collective twist and wants to do something about changing the law, which I think is highly unlikely. But we'll see what they'll do. The Supreme Court justices argued this was only consistent, coherent interpretation, i.e. that sex means sex, male or female. There was already Equality Act guidance which allows for women-only spaces, such as toilets, changing rooms and hospital wards in certain circumstances. But under the new ruling, a person who was born male but identifies as a woman does not have a right to use a space or service designated as women only. This includes transgender women, i.e. men, who have legally changed their gender and hold a GRC. That's got to be the next thing to go. Don't you think? It's got to be the next thing to go. Gender Recognition Act. Get bloody rid of it. Get shot of it. Get this nonsense ended. And then stop providing care on the NHS, which is based around that idea that you can change anything. Baroness Faulkner said, and here's where Baroness Faulkner and I distinctly fall out, trans people should use their power of advocacy to ask for facilities, including a third space for toilets. The answer, Baroness Faulkner, I'm very sorry to say from me, and I imagine, or I think, that might be the same thing from other people, I'll wait until you tell me in the comments whether you agree with me, is that we are not setting up a priestly class that has its own provisions. End of story. They are no different from us in any way, and we are not setting them up as a priestly class. That's my response to that. Now, as Baroness Faulkner said, she's saying trans people should use their power of advocacy. She's not saying that she agrees with it. In fact, I find it very hard to find anybody who does agree with it. People will say it, and then you go, here's why we shouldn't, and they tend to go, oh yeah, you're right. Single-sex services like changing rooms must be based on biological sex if a male person is allowed to use it. To use one, it's no longer a single-sex space. She added the ruling was a victory for common sense, only if you recognise that trans people exist. They have rights, and their rights must be respected. This is really interesting. She said that the ruling was a victory for common sense only if you recognise that trans people exist. They have rights, and their rights must be respected. In other words, it doesn't make common sense if you know or understand that the idea, the concept of trans is a totally made-up category designed to obtain victim status so that you can get yourself made into a priestly class. Once you get that, the whole thing goes away. I said to a young man I know the other day, once you stop calling them trans women and you start calling them men, you can see it for real. Spoke to him yesterday. He said, yes, you can. Well, of course you can. British Transport Police said trans women in custody would now be searched by male officers as an interim measure while it reviews its policies and practices. So in other words, British Transport Police said men in custody would now be searched by men. Well, there we go. See how the lunacy stops when you do that? Under previous policy, we advised that some with a GRC may be searched in accordance with their acquired sex, I suppose. You don't have an acquired sex. So we've got to really be key now in language, in looking at the language, what's said and how it's said. I'm going to be interested to see how this develops. I'm sure you are too. Let me know in the comments what you think, but I'm absolutely convinced that the next move is to end the whole damn thing. But then I would say that, wouldn't I? Eh? So you go well. Bye-bye. It's just, it just drives me mad. I'll see you later. Ta-da.